So we covered a lot, Dave, and there's so much more to sort of say about this world. And I'm wondering if we stay with that sort of storyline in Rune and then work ourselves backwards a little bit, because I think at this point you bring in Kieran Hines, you have this great cast and storyline in the East, and I want to see a realm that Tolkien didn't fully develop. There are really limited hints at the east, although we do have hints about Easterlings and then the Haradrim in the south and other southern peoples. I would love to see those worlds built up. I'm just wondering, when we have these hints at really beloved characters, if we don't go in that direction, does that then feel like a misdirection that was unintentional? And in the Harfoots and the stores and these references to their world, I mean, I get why we're here. I just want to see a storyline that's fleshed out and it feels authentic to Tolkien, and works with the story that the showrunners are trying to tell.
Yeah, I mean, for much of the Harfoot Stranger storyline, it's not my favorite storyline. I wish there was a different way that they can go around doing this. I think it's interesting that they want to try again. It's this whole idea of mystery boxes that J.J. Abrams or whoever decided that should be the thing going forward within these fandom ideas or universes, is that we have to figure out who these people are. Let's just tell people this is who it is, and let's see their journey. It's happened so many times before that most of these things, whenever it happens to be this mystery box idea, it does not hit once it's revealed. It's just something to me that if it is Gandalf, we should get along with that. The whole idea about hinting it and like putting the stories side by side. This is how Gandalf became friends with the hobbits and how he wanted to nurture them and keep them safe. Okay, fine. It's not as interesting as storyline, well, to me anyway, what is going on in Hrun. No one has talked about Hrun before, not even Tolkien in a lot of ways. He doesn't really discover or translate the happenings of the Blue Wizards in Hrun. So I would think more people would be interested in seeing something that is new to us fans as well, as much as people that don't know this stuff as much as we do. And even for the writers, wouldn't you think that you'd want to expand upon that? If you want to make your mark on Middle Earth, that is fertile ground, despite it being a desert. That is fertile ground for you to write something new, while at the same time to still have that essence that they had of Tolkien in the first season.
I agree. I mean, and I kept thinking in season one, maybe the stranger's character is going to be the reanimation or re-embodiment of Glorfindel, another character great in the lore, a first age character who transcends into the second age after leaving the halls of wait. I mean, there's so much that could have been done, and has an encounter with the Balrogs. So there is a kind of echo to the Gandalf storyline that is beautiful. And I kept waiting for that until it was revealed that, okay, we have an Istari. Fine. Okay, that storyline's out. And if it was just a nod to his re-embodiment in the way that he appeared as the man in the moon, comet, whatever, that's glorious too. But I agree, I like your point is we have this sort of fertile ground of the deserts of Rune. Why not really make something incredibly wonderful about it? And you don't necessarily need Tom Bombadil to be there to do it. I like that he's there to some extent. I love what Rory Kinnear is doing with the character and think that there's a lot of real richness and potential there. It's, as you say, those mystery boxes that I start feeling, I'd believe the writers more if they trusted us as fans to really appreciate what they're doing and see their love come through. And I think showing one's love for the material coming through is not recycling dialogue. It's really sitting with the Tolkienian language and finding that warmth and telling the story in his way, but for our current audience.
That is something that I've been trying to get across for such a long time, and you said it so beautifully, Brian. It's that and it's the whole idea of Tolkien and applicability. People talk about, oh, how like, Lord of the Rings is an allegory for nuclear war, or it's for this, or it's for that. No, it's applicability. It is like mythology. And I don't want to say the whole thing, oh, it rhymes. No, it doesn't. Each culture has their own mythology. Yes, there's some, connections here and there that you can make with a red line and yarn and all this kind of stuff. But if you adapt the story, how it was written, yes, there's gaps. Of course, it's the second age, it's in the appendices, it's in things that you don't have rights to. But if you grab onto that chronology that they have in the back of the appendices, you can flesh out those things that happened and still have the massive impact that people have been enjoying about this story for 75 years now. It just, to me, to have this idea about, let's not adapt the order in which it is, the structure in which it is, a story that Tolkien thought about since when he was, what was it, 18 years old, in the trenches, in at the one of the worst battles in history, as an escape in a way. It doesn't make sense to me that something that he thought about for almost entirety of his adult life. Why not adapt that and use the things that us fans love about the relationships between characters, Annatar and Celebrimbor, and flesh that out more so we can have a fully pictured idea. The fans aren't people that just watch the, PJ films, the Jackson trilogy films. In a way, yes, they're good, but you could also make your stamp by adapting the things that they could not adapt. That you could flesh out the story in a way that it's still applicable to what we're going through today. And those stories that are what we're going through today are Numenor and what's going on with Annatar and Celebrimbor. Those things are so important. What Tolkien says about human nature, about humanity as a whole. But at the same time, when you want to, I don't want to say pander towards fans, that's where you get the introductions of lines. Let's give one of the most, if not the most iconic line, and most, for me at least, important line about Tolkien's work via Gandalf to Tom, because we want to use that material we want to use that because that's what we have the rights to. But you can create your own little marks by picking up the pieces with your other minds and hands from Tolkien and using that as a basis for developing what this story could be according to what our time is reflecting.
I think it's hard because you're absolutely right. In the cinematic context, I mean, there's often this need to see and understand the relationships between all these worlds and characters. Whereas in the book, it can be very easy to leave Numenor's story for a while and stay with the elves and feel very comfortable in the realms of the elves and have a sense that the elves maybe don't have as much awareness or concern for the worlds beyond. And yet, in rereading and thinking about the Silmarillion and the nature of Middle Earth and the Appendices and any number of other works of Tolkien, how do we then introduce the storyline of Gil-galad having alliances with Numenorians? Where does that storyline then fit in the way that the story is developing now? Or the Numenorians having their colonies over in Middle-earth, which we've already seen with Pelargir. That's wonderful. But having Isildur go with Elendil and Miriel to Middle-earth and then come back to Numenor and then go back to Middle-earth. It's this sort of backwards and forwards that kind of drives me nuts because you don't see that in the great writings. When Gandalf goes to Minas Tirith and then comes back to Hobbiton, there's a real reason that that return happened. And it helps advance the story in a very dramatic and powerful way and allows you to see that time has passed and yet there's an urgency. And I really want to see that urgency as it develops. That's why I think in some ways the Khazad-dûm storyline feels the most coherent to me, even with the complication of Durin and Durin. That's still complicated. And yet they're under the mountain, they're living their lives, they're going about their worlds as they would, and I sort of trust the storyline as it's developing under the mountain, even with the very quick seduction that Durin III has to the ring, which I think maybe he would have resisted a little bit more, but I'm somehow willing to allow that to happen because I've fallen in love with Khazad-dûm in a way. I thought that I was going to love Eregion and Linden so much more. I do love the spaces, but then I feel saddened that we get a glimpse of Círdan and he's sort of gone and forgotten. And I miss those moments of being able to sit with a beloved character and feel, okay, what is your sense of urgency? Why were you introduced now into our season two? And what else are you going to offer to this storyline? Um, there are some hints from Gil-galad that they can't go at this battle against Sauron and in Eregion and Mordor together without aid. So I'm curious where we'll go in the next two episodes. But it is a real letdown in my mind. Anytime a battle is sort of built up and then we wait episodes and episodes and episodes, and then the battle is stretched out over the final episodes. It's a lot of the warfare and the darkness that I think could be placed elsewhere in developing character and stories.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there because especially when the story of Anatar and Celebrimbor and the Smiths of Eregion are the Gwaith Myrdain is so psychological. It is so it's such a thriller, and it should be treated as that. We need more room to grow, to have that relationship, to have that established rather than over two, maybe two episodes where he's interacting with Halbrand Halbrand. And it's like this whole idea about, we need to have this establishment relationship. The thing that like I'm concerned not concerned about, the thing that I'm trying to wrap my head around is why 8 episodes each season? Why? You have a massive budget. I get it. You want to put that into sets and costumes, although, I've talked about the costuming and the armor and stuff like that this season. But it does seem as if they want to keep it to something strict and tight, but at the same time, they're trying to juggle so many balls all at once that they lose sight of that conciseness. And I feel like, again, the most important stories here are the ones that are being diluted because of those focusing on other things that they don't need to focus on. The audience is not stupid. We can handle something darker. Yes, the people that like those Peter Jackson trilogy, all that kind of stuff, they watch Game of Thrones. That I think was one of the things for this show. Oh, how can we make Tolkien Game of Thrones? Or how can we appeal to those Game of Thrones people? There is every bit of gore, of psychology, of weird family relationships, incest, all that kind of stuff is all within these stories. It is not a idea of Tolkien perfectly good versus perfectly evil. It's not. And it never has been. So I think it's interesting that we're getting this kind of story where they want to put that across in so many different ways. And again, I just feel like it's lacking the edge that people think that it got from seeing the first, you know, glimpses of this season. And I just feel like the relationships that we should be having are lacking.
I agree. I mean, I think the one place maybe where they're not as lacking, as we said, was Khazad-dûm, but then also Numenor. There was some nice development this week. On the one hand, between Elendil's character and I think Miriel as well. What I would have liked to see in season one, upon reflection, is these little references that there are those that are still faithful to the Valar, that still are faithful to elf in general, elf people, but also sort of elf culture and elf language.
Mhm.
That I would have liked to see more, not just told through the perspective of Elendil and then hinted at in Miriel's character, because then it makes the shrine moment that we have in season two not feel as powerful, right? I mean, I would love to have
Yes.
seen we have this tension. They've ousted Tar Palantir, fine, that made sense. But where are those pockets of Numenor where the faithful are still practicing? That we could have glimpsed that, right?
Yeah, no, I completely agree because again, that's the thing that's lacking from the show is that the underlying story here. You don't get this idea about the ban of the Valar, where Numenorians are not allowed to leave the coasts, essentially, not the coasts, but the coasts around the coast, essentially, these borders,
They
these
have to
hard
see their
borders.
borders. That's right. Yeah.
Exactly, they have to see their borders, otherwise, they can be punished by the Valar. We don't have that established. We don't have this idea about deathlessness, about this craving to be like the elves in their immortality. They're not putting across this understanding of, hey, death is a gift. It is a gift to mankind. Tolkien, there's a very famous clip that's going around social media where he talks about what are all the great stories about? Death and our human relationship to death and how we react to it and how we move past it or how we are just in relation to it in general, theologically, thematically. It almost seems as if what they're putting across with the faithful, it's almost as if they're not understanding or they're not trying to understand what makes Tolkien so focused on the faithful. And what is so focusing, or what is so important about the faithful, in that they understand what death is. They don't need to understand what happens after. They don't need to. I mean, that's why with all the great, the one thing about the kings of the tradition of the kings of Numenor and queens of Numenor, is that they give up their rulership. They give it up and then, eventually pass into the west, or not into the west, sorry. They pass. So there you go. See, the things between Peter Jackson and Tolkien, more Peter Jackson stuff is seeping into more people, even ourselves, like this. This whole idea about, the far green country that we got in the previous episode. I'm like, that doesn't fit. You also have this idea about the priest saying, like, that people's souls are within this icon
Relic, yeah.
that we have. Yeah, thank you, relic. That's perfect. Relic, or reliquary kind of thing. It's this idea of this reliquary. So it's almost as if they don't understand how they can present the faithful without just showing them having this persecution complex, and not having the actual substance to give us the background to that persecution and why it's happening and why the Kingsmen hate the faith so much. There isn't that really developed there. Yes, they have one or two references. They have like the whole "they took our jobs" guy. And then, you have that talking point with Kemen, and how, oh, they're mocking us, but you have to show it from their perspective as to why they think that the death is not a gift, that death is a hindrance, and that, because we have that ignorance, we're losing something that the elves have, you know?
I agree. I mean, I keep thinking about Numenor and how central their story is for the rest of this series, quite frankly. I mean, we need to have both Isildur and Sauron back in Numenor
Mhm.
before Numenor's eventual downfall. I really want to see Isildur have this moment with the tree Nimloth, in relation to Farazan's eventual story, because that's incredibly essential for our third age, well, every moment leading into the third age, right? So there's a lot that will continue to happen in Numenor. And I think finding what is that arc that brings Isildur back? How does he get back? Is he coming with Gil-galad, sort of envoys to bring Numenorian troops to aid the elves in some capacity? I have no idea, right? There's a lot of potential. So I'm sort of waiting.
Yeah, my prediction, like, was, not to interrupt you, but my
No, not at
prediction was
all.
that we would see Amundil, or not Amundil, we'd see oh my God, Anarion. That
Anarion,
he
yeah.
that he would meet Anarion, and Anarion and them would eventually go back. Anarion has learned what the true Numenor is, that Numenor is the true Numenor, or he has this established relationship with Gil-galad and is introducing Gil-galad
Exactly.
to, his father, and then via his father, through to our Farazan. You have to establish that relationship. And I also don't feel like, we get that one glimpse when we first meet Isildur on the ship, when he's on training for the Sea Guard. We hear the whisper,
Hmm.
Isildur, when he's looking at what I assume to be a mountain, Meneltarma, like the east, if you will, from Numenor. So it would be interesting to see more of his relationship to the Valar, or sorry, not the Valor, to Eru the One, because they have to have the rights to Eru the One. I don't think that it just doesn't make sense that they wouldn't have that, because that is so vital to Tolkien's cosmology, to his theology as a whole. It doesn't make sense to present the Valar as these gods in a way. Maybe they're misreading it, because people like to misread the Valar into being gods when they're really supposed to be like archangels in a way. Yes, they create, or sorry, they subcreate out of the as a whole to the music of the Ainur, but they also, most of them, for the most part, aren't willing participants in the things that move Eru's will. Eru is the one that has planned every single thing out until the end of days, the Dagor Dagorath, when everything is redeemed as a whole. So it doesn't make sense to me as to why they wouldn't talk about Eru the One, but would talk about the importance of the Valar. at the same time. So that's where I'm kind of at, where I wish they would be more focused on that, but I feel like at the same time, people don't, and I find this like because people don't like to talk or hesitant to talk about Tolkien's Catholic faith because either they don't believe in Catholicism, they don't believe in that kind of stuff, or they don't want to hear it because especially in American media, how it's pushed over and over and over again, mostly in the wrong way. That's me saying that is that they're presenting something like they're trying to proselytize when they're not. And I think that's maybe the fear as to why they don't want to show this idea of Eru. Or at the same time, they don't want to go into the idea of, or maybe it's a little dangerous for them to do so because they don't want to go into this whole C.S. Lewis route where they undermine Tolkien's work by saying like, oh, Tolkien is just using this as a one-to-one for Jesus or a one-to-one for Santa Claus or whatever have you. I mean, no shade to C.S. Lewis, although J.R.R. Tolkien had shade for his one of his best friends of all time, the guy that he converted to Christianity. But anyway, so I just think it's, maybe there's some hesitation there, but they shouldn't be hesitating. They should be going all into this because it is vital to that story.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, I think religion can be a powerfully moving force. It doesn't have to be the kind of divisive or the shy away from storyline. There's a lot of really beautiful aspects of world religions that can be told very powerfully in this sort of fantasy realm. And so I think that's where I agree with you. I'd love to see more of that coming about, especially in the character of Isildur. That makes the most sense. And so now it does occur to me, maybe Gil-galad's reference in this last episode nods to someone like Anarion. Maybe this is the character we get in the next episode. That would feel really great. It would be wonderful to have a kind of final reveal to someone that we've been waiting for since the beginning. We've heard his name at least once, Anarion, correct?
Yeah, I
So
think
I
once or
think
twice.
once or twice, yeah. So we have enough to set him up. So I think there's a lot to say. We have 2 episodes left. I wish there were more, to your point earlier about why only 8. I mean, 8 feels like a nice strategy in some ways, but also, give us 9, 10, 12. I don't know. I do wonder in terms of storytelling if it wouldn't behoove the showrunners to maybe focus a little more, like a whole episode that's situated in Numenor would feel really great in some ways. We don't need to always bounce back and forth to remind us what's been happening, but we'll see. We have 2 great episodes. We know the battle at Eregion, and I suspect the fall of Eregion, but a lot should have happened leading up to that fall of Eregion, including the forging of the One Ring, Sauron's influence in the total destruction, which is now happening at the hands of Adar. Great, fine. So a lot to say in the coming weeks. Any final parting thoughts for our viewers?
I think we might see the forging of the ring in this episode, in this upcoming episode. Because, like you said, that has to happen, and the elves have to be like, wait, something's happening here. Especially Celebrimbor. When is that pushback? He did push back literally in this episode. But when are we gonna see that realization? And that's what I'm really looking forward to in the next 2 episodes.
And that's the thing. I mean, so then is Anatar going to flee to Mordor in this moment as the battle's taking place, forge the ring really quickly, and then appear? Or do they just sense him, which might be the other part, that he flees at the heat of battle, leaving the elves of Region to their doom,
Mhm.
and goes off to. I'll be interested to see how that storyline comes about because we need the One Ring to be forged in the fires of Mount Doom. If that doesn't happen, something's really wrong with the lore. I'm sorry. But you're right. There has to be a major realization and revelation, and that final spiral for Celebrimbor as well. Whether we watch his full demise this season or not, TBD. TBD. Well, Dave, thank you as always. We've really touched on a lot. I'm sorry that we've left Galadriel aside a little bit. I think her storyline is one we'll pick up on next week. There was a lot that maybe felt like she was done dirty, I think, as we were saying before we chatted. So let's pick up with her next week because we've spent a lot of time with Galadriel at this point. But thank you as always, and until our next conversation, Namarie.
I'm out of